Hello and welcome back to Southside Westeros. I'm your host and master of whispers, D. Paul, and I welcome you to another journey through the catacombs of Westeros. Today, we enter the Book of Snow. That's right, we're going to talk about Jon Snow or Aegon Targaryen, depending where you are in the seasons. As always, we're going to go deep into the actual show that was presented to us by HBO, but certain characters require that we go into the book so you can understand them fully and go through the source material, not with a fine-tooth comb, perhaps, but just accept it differently. You realize that HBO presented the materials to you. However, if you dive deep, you'll get a deeper meaning to what George wanted you to see and even what the showrunners decided to present to you. So, in the Book of Snow, to understand him, we have to go into his background. So, this is going to be a casino effect where we give you the end and then go back to the beginning and then tell the story from there. What was Jon meant to be in this show? He was meant to be the hero. Long story short, he was meant to be the one that we follow, and it grew. The heroism grew with every episode, and his moral compass was put out on display with every passing season. And he was giving opportunity after opportunity to self-serve, and he continuously chose to be selfless and help those around him, even though, regardless of his status as a bastard, he could have lived a life of relative comfort because that's what Ned Stark provided to him. Where all of his angst came from was he wanted to be legitimate. Similar to the Boltons, believe it or not. That's why the Battle of the Bastards, when we get to that portion of his story, the antithesis of that is the battle between he and Ramsay, two bastards who both sought legitimacy and who both were hamstringed by half lessons that their fathers gave them. However, it was the moral compass of Jon Snow and the Targaryen fire in his blood that allowed him to overcome Ramsay, but it was also the love in his heart. So I think that was a lesson, but we're jumping ahead. You know I like to do that. But we're going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to mix in some things from the book to kind of beef up his background and let you see where this man came from. Now, the Book of Snow is going to have several chapters, obviously. This man was present throughout the entire show. All 8 seasons, 63 episodes. There's no way we can really delve deeply into who he is in one podcast, but we're going to just present it. We're going to have a conversation, and you and I will hopefully come to a new understanding about who this man was. Maybe we'll see some holes in his character, or maybe we'll see some plots that were downplayed that show just how good he was, more than what the showrunners wanted you to see. So he is the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. But we're going to start from his earlier life, and we'll get to the point where he finds these things out. But I don't feel that you and I should play the game of let's explore this together. I know you know Jon Snow. I know Jon Snow. Now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of what makes up the Book of Snow. So I'm going to start off with a little quote from Lyanna to Ned about her son Jon. His name is, "If Robert finds out, he'll kill him. You know he will. You have to protect him. Promise me, Ned. Promise me. So 18 years before the War of Five Kings, Rhaegar Targaryen allegedly abducted Lyanna Stark. And we've spoken about this in the past. If you want to go into this, you can reference the House of Baratheon podcast, even the Ned Stark podcast, and we've even gotten to a little bit of it in the Catelyn Stark. But this was an alleged, supposed abduction, and I told you my stance on that and why it was lazy writing to not reference that this was an unbelievable charge. It wasn't believable, and this is why the Starks, Ned's father and brother, only went down by themselves with very minimal guards. If they felt this was a real abduction, I think they would have marched on the south, marched on the Mad King. So I think the premise, or they kind of downplay the fact that this was an unbelievable kind of thing to everyone but Robert. So this was one of those lies that they had to believe. This is a lie that everyone had to accept, so everyone can get along and the world can be the place that all those in power want it to be. But that abduction is what led to Robert's rebellion. So even though it's referenced or you're pushed in the position of that this was all for love, I don't believe it. This was more so for business and more so to get rid of the Mad King as he was growing increasingly unstable. So you have to have a story. It's almost like the modern times now, where the media has to get you excited or get you outraged about something. And once they do that, you're more accepting of, gray area tactics that one may have to do to obtain their objective. Same thing back then in this medieval time. You had to get the people on your side. Even though you looked at them as dogs, they still can come together at any time and uprise against your reign. So they needed to get the people on their side to create Robert's rebellion. Rhaegar did eventually return to fight in the war, but not before leaving Lyanna behind at the Tower of Joy. Now, she was guarded by Lord Commander Gerald Hightower and Sir Arthur Dane of the Kingsguard, regarded as two of the best swordsmen and warriors of the time. Eddard, Ned, rode to war along with her betrothed, Robert Baratheon, to rescue his sister and avenge the deaths of their father and brother at the hands of Aerys II, a.k.a. the Mad King. Now, Robert ultimately killed Rhaegar in the Battle of the Trident, as legend has it, although I have brought up my apprehension at whether Rhaegar was in fact killed by Robert, or if he escaped or died, unfortunately, by jumping into the water. Having such heavy Targaryen armor, he would have been pulled to the bottom and probably drowned. We may get into that when the House of Targaryen series, which will start soon. I want to kind of time that up right before the House of the Dragon, so we can get into some Targaryen history and get a better understanding of what's going to be presented to us on 8/21/22. So Ned continued south in search of his sister and ultimately found her at the Tower of Joy, in the Red Mountains at the border of Dorne. So you remember the Targaryens and the Dornish, very close, Volantis, all these places, and you would think them being the ultimate Southerners, they would be comfortable in the lands between Dorne and there, and would probably have a lot of allies or people sympathetic to the Targaryen reign, and you see that in the Daenerys and Viserys storyline. But Ned and his companions engaged in a final melee, as can be seen in Bran's warging back in history with the Three-Eyed Raven, and it resulted in the deaths of everyone, and except for Ned and Howland Reed. So after he defeated the Kingsguard, he rushed to save his sister. Ned, of course, I think he embellished slightly the story, and Bran actually saw that. Um, Ned wasn't as honorable as he claimed, but he was a winner. He found Lyanna dying from the childbirth. So that was interesting there, because a few podcasts back, Bastards and Broken Things, with Jon's friend throughout the show. I do believe they were friends, Tyrion. And that's another commonality that they have. They both would, in the words of Tywin, kill their mothers to enter the world. But she had just given birth to Jon. And desperate to protect the life of that newborn, like any mother would, and any Stark woman at that point. I believe the Stark women have a great, almost regal bloodline behind them. I think the Tullys sullied it up a little bit with Caitlyn, but Arya will continue it on, as well as Sansa. As she faded from life, though, she made Ned promise to protect that son, as I referenced earlier, and keep him from Robert, keep the truth from Robert. Now, I have referenced in the Ned podcast, I felt that Ned wasn't being as honorable as they were presenting it to you on HBO. I think he also had his own agenda to keep this lie going, because he wanted to avenge the deaths of his father and brother, and quite frankly, he was upset that he had to take power. He had to be the one in charge. He did it, but somebody had to pay. Now, furthermore, the boy's existence was a potential threat to the claim of the Iron Throne. So if he's alive and he's a child and he's born and it wasn't born of rape, and you found that they were actually married, then Robert has no claim at all, even though Robert has Targaryen blood. So Rhaegar's other children, of course, all perished, as well as his wife, Elia Martell. They were killed at the instruction of Tywin Lannister by the Mountain. Ned resolved to pass Lyanna's son off as his own bastard and raise him at his home castle. A great blow to his honor, because other than some of his issues, Ned was an honorable man. He did try to do the right thing at all times. He just failed in this regard publicly. Now, that was the best thing he could have done. I think he didn't have the power to go up against Robert, and he didn't want Robert's wrath, because Robert and Stannis and the Baratheons could have sacked Winterfell. They had enough power, and Robert was hot-headed enough to make that happen. But he did take a lot of heat from Cat, his wife. Even though she never loved him, I think she enjoyed the position of being the angry lady of the house and making him pay at every whim. But rather than use his birth name, which would have given it away, I mean, it's Aegon, right? But how many Aegons are in the frozen north? But he called him Jon after Jon Arryn. So that is not reference. I think that would be a wonderful tidbit to drop HBO, that Jon was named after Jon Arryn, the man who raised Ned and Robert and gave Ned that sense of honor, that sense of duty. And then for Jon they don't really reference if Snow ever met Jon Arryn. I would think not, because of the whole bastard thing, but for everything we know about Jon Arryn, he was an honorable man, and he was about duty. And then Jon Snow grows up without ever really being under the tutelage of his namesake directly, becomes that honorable man. I'm just setting the stage, people, for the Book of Snow. I hold this character in a very high regard. We're going to get into all the little tidbits and corners of his character and We're going to unpeel the onion and all the layers, because he's very deep. He's very transparent, but he's also very deep. And this character, when you look at all of the scenes and all the trials and tribulations he's been through, I think you're going to appreciate him even more. I do a lot of Reddit conversations, and get a lot of DMs, and I have a lot of emails that I reference where people tell me what they feel about these characters. People just offer it up. They want me to have subjects to speak of, and they want to hear them. And some of the most deadly venom is directed towards Jon Snow, and because of the Daenerys thing. And I feel it's unfair, because you have to judge a man by the measure of his actions, not just one action, or whether you felt he was wrong for that or not. Look at all the things he had done just to get her to that point. She would not have gotten there. As you saw, the dead would have destroyed her dragons. She would have been unprepared. She wouldn't have known the dragon glass was something. So all these unsullied and all, they would have been done just like that scene you saw in Winterfell. Season 3 of the final season. But I digress again. I like to jump around, and I'm sorry. And I do want to remind you folks that the YouTube channel is up and popping. And this particular episode actually is the first episode where I'm also recording live video. Now, on the YouTube channel, we have fun videos, clips, trailers, but we also do have audio of the past podcasts. So if you want to play it on your computer while you're working and just listen to it, that's fine. But for all purposes, you're really not looking at anything. It's just a flyer throughout the entire episode. And some of them are quite long, 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes. So this particular episode, I'm actually recording it as we're recording it. It's crazy. It's kind of crazy. Audio should be good. I am recording it on a Samsung S22 from AT&T. I traded in a Samsung S8 and got $800 off that. Now, this is the Ultra version. So this is the best camera available on the market today. I'm going to actually edit the video right on the phone and then upload it to YouTube. So you tell me what you think. You're also getting a peep into the Master of Whispers lair, the Spider's lair. That's right, Southside Westeros Studios. And you're seeing a small portion, but this is where we're going to be having panels. You're going to see a bunch of people sitting around here debating, maybe drinking White Walker whiskey or juice from Tormund Giantsbane's horn. Maybe some proper drink. In the words of Mance Raider, have fermented milk. Who knows? But after you finish listening to this on one of the many podcast mediums we're available, shoot on over to the YouTube channel. Give me a thumbs up, smash that like button, subscribe, and share. And also, if you got some more time, comment. Let me know what you think. Okay, back to Jon. Now, Jon spent the next 17 years being raised in Winterfell as Ned's illegitimate son, alongside his true-born children with his wife. Now, understandably, Ned never told anyone, including Kat and Jon himself, who his mother was, or even if she was still alive. And they do reference this. And again, HBO, I'm not here to pick you apart. Lazy writing. This was a great moment. Now, I know you didn't want to show or give too much away in terms of his lineage and what he was, but you could have had a greater moment with him asking Ned on a horse as they're going in separate directions and may never see each other again. Like, come on. This could have been done at night, walking around, something. You could have had a moment with him. Again, Ned, when pressed by Robert, Ned won't answer, and Ned kind of vaguely claimed that John's mother's name was Walia, and some of they met during the war. But one thing about Ned, he never treated John much differently from his own children. John was equal. Now, other people treated him differently, and unfortunately, Ned, as the Lord, had a certain image to upkeep, so sometimes he had to hold his tongue when, for instance, that scene where Theon Greyjoy was kind of saucing him. And, of course, when Kat decided she wanted to play evil stepmother and treat him terribly, he can only beg her to stop. He couldn't really, put the pimp hand down, Ned. That's because you were holding all those secrets. But despite sharing a happy marriage, John's presence at Winterfell would serve as a contrast all the time. It was something that Kat can pull from, and Ned had to take. Now, even though it's said that she never mistreated John, she was cold towards him and avoided him whenever possible. So even though she didn't beat him or deny him food, just that lack of a maternal love, that mother's hand, that soft presence in this cold northern world where I'm expected to grow up to be a killer. Yes, they call it Lord or Brotherhood of the Night Watch or anything, but at the base of what I am practicing and learning every day is how to kill, how to take the life of an enemy, how to take the life of another. And to deal with all of that, especially in that time, you had the softness of your mother, that female presence that you can go put your head, kind of like when the Unsullied, that Unsullied soldier, would go to the brothel and pay her, even though they had no genitals because they were castrated, but he would pay the prostitute to just lay on her and have her rub his head and be soft. And that's what she denied John. And because of that denial, that did make him what he was, but that made her horrible because that child did nothing to you. Nothing. And you had him from a baby. I can see if he showed up at Ned's door at 11 or 12 years old, at even 9, she had him from a baby. Just wondered I get it. I got fans, especially one, Coach. He tells me all the time that I have a deep disdain for Catelyn Stark, and I just keep letting it come out, and I do. She's horrible. I've actually been working with other YouTubers and another podcaster, and we actually are going to do a 5-part series on why Cat Stark sucks. And we're going to do this based on the book, too. So that's going to be good. You're going to get that advertised very shortly. Now, he was the only living reminder of the fact that Ned dishonored her. And she would later confess to her daughter-in-law, Talisa, I don't know if you remember that, but about how John caught chickenpox that time. And we've spoken about this. And how she prayed. She prayed for the boy to escape death. Well, actually, no, excuse me. Let me rewind that. Now, she stayed with him throughout the night and prayed to the gods to let him live out of the guilt for previously praying for his death. So she wanted him to live, but she was also guilty because she prayed for him to die. That is Cat Stark. She prayed for him to die, but this is not her podcast. We're going to get into that later. But she was supposed to accept the boy and not blame the boy for her son's sin. But even through all that, she still could not accept him. Now, due to his bastard status, John grew up feeling like an outsider at Winterfell. It's clear. I mean, everyone is a Stark and you're a Snow. And even this, the way Snow is said. Look at you, Snow, Snow. Said with such disrespect. The impact of the way and the tone. And even the lowest of the low can talk down to you, even though your father is a lord. Now, although Ned would see that he was well treated, John's attendance at Winterfell's more formal occasions was restricted, as you saw, when he was not allowed to meet the king and queen. He couldn't even sit at the Lord's table as to not offend important guests. Offend. His existence was offensive, even though his father was a lord. So this is what a child had to deal with. But otherwise, he lived better than many bastard-born children. I mean, he was the son of the Lord. He ate the best food. He learned from Sir Roderick, the master of arms, and he had the best steel and the best chainmail, and he rode the best horses, and he had Ned Stark's lessons. Even though some of them may have turned out to be hollow, he did have a good life. But how good can a life be when you have no love in it? Like, Ned has to love you in the shadows. He can't openly love you. He can give you everything his kids have, but you're a lord, you're rich. But he can't openly love you, and love is denied from ultimately your aunt, but your stepmother, the wicked, wicked stepmother. He was loved by his father and siblings, though. Siblings loved him, all of them. Even Sansa, she was just a little spoiled brat. He was never hungry or poor, and he lived in his father's castle. He had a noble's upbringing. He did have a highborn education. He was a smart man, and Tyrion referenced this when he was at the Night's Watch. His training, Maester Luwin made sure he knew what others. So I think that part is grazed over in the show, and people don't understand the importance of this. And even I didn't reference this in Ned's podcast purposefully because I wanted to save it for John's. But I want you to think about this. He had a highborn education. So he had that education, Maester Luwin, and they showed you the type of education he would have. Maester Luwin would sit with these children for hours and hours and hours and teach them and let them know why what he was teaching them was important. And you can see how Bran would kind of backtalk him, but he would still go through his lessons because the Maester, through his years and patience and experience, he understood that, yes, these children just want to run around, but I have to teach them. But more so, I have to show them why what I'm teaching them will be important later. Now, what Sir Roderick taught him, we saw that with his fighting skill, with his fighting prowess, how he could stand up to whites and wildlings and everyone that came in before him, how he himself can win the Battle of the Bastards through that. That's all Sir Roderick. Sir Roderick does not get the credit for what he brought to the table. So that's why he earned his own podcast just now. So look for that to be coming soon. But the Sir Roderick Kessel factor can be seen, even though you didn't realize that's what it was. That's what it was. He was the guy that taught these people how to fight. It wasn't Ned. Ned didn't spend hours with them. It was Roderick who made sure they knew how to use a bow, who made sure they knew how to swing steel, and who made sure the muscles necessary to continuously swing that steel and survive. Not only kill, but survive. That's what Sir Roderick brought to the table. But Maester Luwin taught Jon to be a diplomat, the art of diplomacy. He taught him how to deal with lords and ladies and the commoner. And even though he forgot that lesson when he was frustrated at his station in life later on in the story, those lessons came in handy when he dealt with everyone, when he dealt with those around him. Jon was being Jon, but Jon also had the tools to manipulate people ever so subtly. He just didn't use his powers for evil. So in dealing with all the northern lords and calming them down. First, convincing them that he's the Lord of the North, the King of the North, and then convincing them why he shouldn't be anymore, but why they should still back him up, or convincing Daenerys and everyone else, or just the way he walks. And the older ones, like the Onion Knight and Servaris, they see this man, and because of his, it's not just because he's this honorable cat. He has the tools, he has the education to be a king. He understands how to rule. He's learned it. We miss that part. We don't pay attention because we're just focused on the woe is me portion of Jon Snow and the story of him overcoming all of these obstacles in his way. However, Jon Snow was prepared for what he faced, more so than a low-bottom, low-born person would have been. And that's not to take anything from him, and that's not to make him lose any points in your eyes, but I do want you to lose some of the amazement at the fact that he can do any of the things he did. Take that away and then break down his accomplishments. And then you can kind of see other things that were more amazing that we grazed over for the blood and guts. Right? Now, of the Stark children, Jon, of course, was the closest to Robb. This is not really that hard to see. Robb was basically close to his age. They were boys, they were brothers. They were both tough. Robb was tougher, which I want to kind of go into that later when we do Robb's House of the Stark. Just that Stark blood, man. That Stark blood does something, But Robb, they were regular companions. If one was training, the other was training. If one was riding, the other was riding. Now, he was close to both Bran and Rickon, too, but they were little brothers. And Jon having that protective nature, and I think that's from him being a bastard, never feeling stable, never having the stability of a Robb or a Rickon or a Bran that they know, I'm a Stark. I have a place in this world, and I always have a home. Jon doesn't have one. So I think the protective nature he had over Bran and Rickon was understandable. Now, there was a friendly rivalry between Theon and himself. And we saw the sniping, but we never got that either. And that can be understood. They're both relatively bastards. Theon is a captive, a ward, and he's beneath the children. And Jon, even though he's treated the same by Ned, in everyone else's eyes, you're beneath the children as well. So you understood why you could tell they were familiar with each other, but there wasn't that relationship. It was the kind of thing where, we go way back, but there wasn't a relationship. Now, the relationship he had, of course, was like even Bran and Rickon. There wasn't a relationship. They were his little brothers. But he had a relationship with Robb, and he had a relationship with Arya, who, because she was a tomboy and unladylike, she also felt like an outsider. So they bonded, and we've spoken about that in the past, how they bonded based on their. Now, Arya was an outsider by choice or by who she was inside, but she still can go back to being a Stark, whereas Jon wanted to be a Stark, but he was an outsider. But they could bond on that because her being an outsider and not being abnormal in the eyes of everyone, it made her appreciate Jon that much more. And of course, her being young, he was protective of her too. She was his little sister. So you can imagine him being even more protective of her as a female. Now, in contrast, the Sansa relationship was unpleasant. Now, Not just because she's spoiled, but she's her mother's daughter. And when we break down Sansa's personality at some point, I'm going to show you she's not all Cersei, and she's not all Littlefinger, and not all Tyrion. She's got a lot of Cat Stark in her, and that led to most of her mistakes. But some of it served her well. But she was aloof and cold and standoffish, and really hated everybody that wasn't there to serve her. So let's jump into season 1. So Jon and Robb instruct Bran in archery. We see that scene where Ned's looking on, and Ned is a very tall figure to Jon, huge figure, and he's not just a manager, right? He's not just the boss. He's something to aspire to. He's someone who you would work your whole life just to get his respect, just a scrap of his respect, just an acknowledgement that you are on the right path to being a man, and one day you would be like him. And now, this is when Ned receives the deserter, and they go out to deal with him. Now, the penalty for deserting the Night Watch is death. The Night's Watch is comprised of bastards and broken things as well, pimps, pushers, and drug dealers, and criminals. And so I'm sure these laws were put in place to scare the criminals who are there, not the people who are there out of honor. Like Jon, I think that's few and far between. I think most Night's Watchmen are absolutely criminals. And through the fear of death, they become heroes. Or at least serviceable rangers or something else. But Jon accompanies his father along with Robb, Bran, Theon, and Roderick. And Jory, my buddy Jory Kessel. And Roderick's nephew. We don't speak about him enough either, but there was a reason why he went down with Ned, but we'll get out of that. Will, who is the deserter, has to get beheaded. This is Bran's first execution. Jon tells him, look, because if you don't, father will know. Jon praises Bran afterwards for being tough. See, he was the consummate big brother. More so than Robb could have been. If you notice, Jon had a better relationship with his younger siblings than Robb did. Robb was responsible. So it was almost like that Bran and Ned relationship where Robb is the older brother. He's the one that's going to take over. So it's all serious with him. Robb is always serious. He tries to have a little fun, but he's going to tell you what you're doing wrong all the time. He doesn't have time to soften you up. I'm here to save you, not hug you. Jon was here to save you, but he hugged you a little bit. Gave you a little something. A little something. They obviously find the dire wolves, and Jon convinces. You notice Jon's reverence for Ned and his understanding of the respect him as a bastard has to have for him. He refers to him as Lord Snow. Lord Snow, please. You have 5 children. Here's 5 dire wolves. That's your sigil. Please keep them. And I think he did that again for his love for his younger siblings. Robb didn't really care. Theon just wanted to be a jerk. And he saw that his little brother wanted them. And he didn't have the power or the Stark name to be able to speak out. So he did what he could. And with as much respect and reverence, he begged for his little brother to have a wolf. And through that act, his other siblings would have some too. Ned allows it, and he's gets the wolves for them. And when they're walking off, Jon finds another one, who turns out to be Ghost, the runt of the litter. And Theon makes fun of him, because I guess Theon refers to Jon as a runt because Theon and Robb are both tall, while Jon is of a shorter stature, as we know. But this would ultimately be named Ghost, and as you know, Ghost comes later on. So we go through the part where they have to get groomed, and now I found it funny, and I thought this was cruel on Catelyn Stark's part, because she instructed all of them to be groomed and have their hair cut, but you had no plans to have Jon meet the king or even sit at the Lord's table. So this was like getting a kid all dressed up and telling him you come to pick him up and having him waiting on the front step. Uh, and he never gets it. And so that's why you see him so angrily um, hitting the practice dummy with the practice sword when Uncle Benjen shows up. Now you can imagine when you see the interaction between John and Uncle Benjen, you see who John fashions himself behind, the other part of him. Uncle Benjen probably was that cool uncle, that gave John a little extra attention because you understood how tough his life was. Even though he was a rich kid, you understood how tough his life was, so you gave him a little extra attention. You always looked out for him. You always snuck him a candy or snuck him a sweet when Catelyn wouldn't give him something. That's who Benjen was, and that's who John would become to his little brothers and sisters. And Uncle Benjen is in the Night's Watch right now, and John wants to go, and he wants to go now because there's nothing here for me. I've outgrown my usefulness. I have to find some legitimacy in the world. I have to know I matter. I have to know that I'm not a mistake. This is where John is now, guys. This is where he is in his life. Yes, he's got the best food. Yes, he's got 5 brothers and sisters. Yes, he's got Ned Stark. He's got Roderick. He's got Maester Lewin. He's got everything. But he has nothing at the same time because I'm not legitimate. All of this can be taken away from me. And nobody respects me. Me, who I am. So I have to go out and make a name for myself. And the name I want to make for myself is a name of honor. So the only thing a bastard like myself can do is go to the Night's Watch. Now, since they don't care about recruits past or even the bastards, then, of course, this is a place for him. Now, then he meets Tyrion, of course. As a dwarf, Tyrion knows what it's like to be an outcast. So he is drawn to Jon Snow, and Tyrion, being a man of understanding that information is power when you have a diminutive size, he's already pulled Jon Snow's file, so he knows all of the public information about him. Now, Tyrion, being a man who is astute, he probably picks up some of the inconsistencies with his story. And when he does that, that makes him want to be Jon Snow's friend even more. He calls him a bastard openly, and they have that little exchange where he tells him all dwarves are bastards in their father's eyes. A very profound statement, and Jon, being trained, understood it. Now, I find it interesting in that this next interaction Jon has was downplayed. He has a run-in with Jaime Lannister, one of the best swordsmen in the land, and who infamously killed his grandfather, the Mad King. At the time, he doesn't know that's his grandfather, so he just looks at him as Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer. Jaime sarcastically thanks him for protecting all of them from the mystical monsters at the Wall, because Jaime can't respect a man going to the Wall for what? But that's because he's a spoiled brat who has fathered 3 children with his sister, but we'll get into him later. He's just taunting him at this part. I thought they could have got a little more meat off those bones too, but they have enough interaction later on for me. I'm fine with that. He tries to say goodbye to Bran. Of course, Catelyn Stark can't resist. This man is going to the Wall. She knows where he's going. She knows what type of life he's going through, but she cannot resist turning that knife one more time. And he can't even say goodbye to his little brother. She tells him to get out. And he meets up with Arya, gives her his sword, hugs her ever so gently because he doesn't know if he'll see her again, and he wonders who will protect her. Tells her he'll miss her. And then they both hug. He prepares a saddle. And Robb asks Jon if he said goodbye to Bran, like an older brother would, and he says sure. Robb's smart enough to know how his mom feels about him and figures what happened. They have that moment between brothers. Uh, they say some things, but it's a moment between two best friends. It's his best friend leaving, and Rob's best friend. Even though he looks at him like a little brother and looks at him a little less, he they just have to say goodbye to each other. They have the parting moments on the King's Road where he asks Ned again about his mother, and Ned tells him the next time I see you, I'll tell you, which is ridiculous. This is your son or your nephew. I mean, I understand you don't see much of a future for him because if he ever knows who he is, he might be killed. You don't foresee Robert going anywhere, so the Wall may be the best place for him. It's where his uncle is, and he can go out and do great things and protect the realm from the wildlings. So he's fine with this. He, Benjen, and Tyrion, of course, are going. And that's why he's eager to let him go up there, and he doesn't want to send him up there with that information because he's not going to go to the Wall, and he may want to let the world know who he is, which will put him in direct conflict with Robert. And Ned would have to choose sides, which means he would have to choose his nephew's side. So the North and the South will go to war, and the Westeros will have a civil war. No, we can't have that. Of course, Ghost, who is growing up, accompanies him to the Wall. So at Castle Black, Jon's expectations are quickly, the rug is pulled from under him. He realizes actually where I'm at. I am here with a bunch of savages. I am here with, these men are here for a reason. They can fight wildlings for a reason because they're all criminals. They're all evil, evil men. And he feels he's better than them. It's not what he thought it would be. He thought it's this grand story that's sung to you by all the minstrels of how you're going to go to war with the wildlings and be great. No, it's a place of depression. It's a bunch of guys. It's a bunch of guys, and you're not allowed to have women. You can't have kids. They don't want you focused on anything else. You got Sir Alistair Thorne, who is a wretched creature and can't stand anything highborn, and probably hates Ned Stark, but can't stand Jon Snow and humiliates him at every point in turn. He feels all the recruits are beneath him. Benjen has to go out, so he's on his own. Pip and Gren, he trains them after they try to kill him because he's looking out for Sam. These are all things. I'm grazing over these things because we know these, and it's not really a big part of his story. The part that gets him is the trajectory he doesn't see. Now, because he's so wanting legitimacy so bad, he doesn't fall back on his training from Maester Luwin. And that's where Sam comes in. You see, Pip and Gren, they appeal to his Roderick side, the fighters, the rough guys, the boys. Sam appeals to his Maester Luwin side, the smart. Jon's a smart guy. He's not stupid. He's very intelligent. And Sam has to remind him to think sometimes. He has to remind him that everything is not what it seems. So the ultimate insult comes when Jon is not picked to be a ranger in his eyes, and when he's picked to be a helper to Sir Jeor Mormont. He's his personal steward. And Jon thinks this is an insult until Sam has to remind him that you are going to be the Lord Commander's personal steward. He's handpicked you to take over his leadership, and this is why everyone is upset. So after you hear that, Jon is okay. Now, this is when Uncle Benjen's horse returns without Uncle Benjen. And of course, Jon does not want to follow the rules. He wants to go out there and find his uncle. He wants to do things his own way. And this is a common theme. It helps him, but it also hinders him in ways. It's at this point that Ned actually gets in prison, and Jon finds this out. And Thorne taunts Jon for being the son of a traitor and a bastard. Jon draws his knife in anger and then gets restricted. Of course, Ortho's corpse comes to life. Mormont and Jon kill it, and earning him a pardon. Clearly, you saved the Lord Commander. He's good. Unlock him. This is when Jon first gets Longclaw from Jeor. I mean, this moment here, even with Gior Mormont. You see that this is an older man who has had a lot of battles and a lot of fight, and what he's been through to get there is exacerbated by the insults and the shame that his son Jorah brought upon the family by selling slaves. So I think Gior is looking for a redemption of sorts. And he recognizes what Jon is. I mean, if you're an older man, you see a kid like Jon, you I'll be your dad, but I want you. I want to be your father. I want you. You are the son I never had. You are the son that I can be proud of. Here's Longclaw. Yes, this was in my family for generations, but no one with my name on it is worthy of it yet. So until then, I will give it to you because you showed me there that you deserve this. You have something special. You are the best in here, and you are our best option to face the night. And Jon ponders abandoning the watch to join Robb's army so he can march against the Lannisters. But it's Aemon Targaryen, his family, that tells him that he needs to stay. Now, he didn't tell him he had to, but he told him that he needed to because he's being tested. And he gave him his decision so many years ago that he had when his brother was killed and the family was killed during Robert's Rebellion and they were raped and murdered. Yeah, he wanted to leave and rise up. And at that time, he could have got a considerable army together and could have, Robert's Rebellion could have gone a different way. But he understood that he made a commitment, just like Sam, Pip, and Gren told him, you made a commitment and we need you here. There has never been someone of your caliber here. Don't look at it as we're beneath you. Look at it like you're going to pull all of us up to where we need to be to defeat what's coming. You don't see it, but we see it. Now, Mormont tells Jon that their war against the White Walkers is more important than any other war in the Game of Thrones. Any King's Landing crap, anything for the Thousand Blades. What's happening here will affect all of that. And that is what affected Jon later on. That tutelage, even though it was for a short time of Jeor Mormont, he put in that sense of urgency in Jon. That moment they had in that room with that white where they had to kill it without the knowledge of how to kill it, showed Jon what was coming. And he understood at that point, and he was the best person to understand at that point because Jon knew nothing else. See, he never had lands, he never had titles, he never had a name, so he had no aspirations for a throne. He could never get it. So because he had no aspirations for that, none of that meant anything to him. All that mattered to him was life and death. And what he was staring at in the face was death for the entire Westeros. Jon Snow was created in the first season, people. In the very first season, Jon Snow became what we needed him to be. And it just added pieces to his character as the show went on. Now, Jeor mentions about his little trip going away, and he swears that he will never desert again. And he accompanies the troops that go out to go look for Benjen. And that was the end of season 1. So on part 2, we're going to get into season 2 and possibly season 3. Because I didn't have to do as much setup for this. So this will be coming up probably in the next few episodes. I'm going to start to really get into the part 2s and 3s that you folks are waiting for. I've been getting all of your correspondence. I hear what you're saying, and I will make it happen for you. I hope you enjoyed the Book of Snow part 1. I think part 2 was going to be more action-packed. We're going to get into some deep stuff, and You're going to like that even more. But thanks for joining me. And as always, you can go on Buzzsprout or any one of these other platforms and see past episodes, but you can shoot over to the YouTube channel and watch them as well as watch today's video. You can also be a patron through Patreon, Buy Me Coffee, or through Cash App. And that gives you exclusive access to hidden episodes that the public never hears. Only my patrons do. All right? So you check the description for that. But I will see you next time, and thank you for joining me through another journey through George's world of Westeros.